Hello and welcome. I hope you're having a lovely long weekend. In today's exciting episode, I make this tweed jacket. It's a linen tweed and I use the Butterick pattern number 6123 with dolman sleeves to make it. It's perfect. Perfect, perfect, perfect. Perfect jacket. Now, as I mentioned, I ended up making this jacket here with the linen tweed in olive and khaki and sort of brown, but I started with this knit because this is the one that I wanted to use. But as you may have noticed, I've recently been extremely preoccupied with using up my leftover bits of fabric. So I was working on a green one, which, it's still not made, but, working on it. And I was sewing together all the bits for, you have to create the fabric before you can actually make the dress. Anyway, I invested way too much time in that. And then I was like, oopsie, got to make the tweed jacket. So yeah, normally I would use the Vogue 7975, which has a million pieces in it. But I was just like, if I'm going to get a jacket done, so this is the Vogue 7975, highly recommend. I'm getting a lot of questions at the moment about what jacket I recommend. That one. It's got good instructions, fits all sort of shapes and sizes. But anyway, this is a dolman sleeve one, so it's just got front left, front right and back. And so this is it on the left, and the smaller size is a size 8, and I generally make a size 6 for my jackets. So this Chanel tweed in the navy on the right is my normal size 6, and you can see how much baggier the dolman sleeve one is on the left. So what I'm going to do is just take an inch out of the center back and half an inch out of the front left and front right. And I'm also going to crop it because I've got sort of a really short waist, but I've also got one of those high athletic butts. So it looks better if I have a cropped jacket. I look more normal. So I'm just going to make a few little tweaks. I would also normally lengthen the sleeves because they're bracelet length, whereas I like them full length. But dolman sleeves, because the whole piece is cut out in one, if you add anything to the sleeves, you basically have to buy another 5 inches of fabric. And I already bought my fabric years ago, so I can't do that. So anyway, here we go. And I'm using a knit fabric so I can show you how to block interface. Actually, you need to do this with most wools and most tweeds anyway, because the fabric is so loosely woven. So you spread the fabric out over the area the table where you're cutting it. And then see, I've got the beads. You put one hand at the top of one corner and the other hand at the bottom of the other corner. Then you do the opposite and you sort of just gently stretch it out. And by doing diagonal corners, you sort of do it evenly. And then you go away and leave it there. So go and have a coffee or something so it can gently sort of scrunch back to where it's not supposed to be. And then you just block interfacing is where you get your structural layer. So whether you've got pre-washed cotton or you're using a netting like I've got here, you just pin it to the back of your tweed or in this case, a knit. And I've pinned it in the lines where I'm going to sew it. So every 2 inches, you pin your sew lines and then you hand sew the two together. I am always asked if you can machine sew the two layers. I do not recommend it. I strongly, strongly recommend that you hand sew. If you just can't bring yourself to block interface, what you can do is, as you can see here, this is just a piece of the back piece of a jacket. You can cut out your pieces of your structural layer, then pin those to your fabric and hand stitch just each of your pattern pieces to your tweed that you're working on or the knit. And then once you've stitched the two layers together, cut around the tweed, and then you can put them all together, pin them all together, sew them into a jacket. But yeah, I would never use machine on tweed or anything like that. It's not dressmaking, it's tailoring. Dressmaking is completely awesome and it works when you're doing dressmaking, but it's not the same as doing a tailored outer garment that needs to stand the test of time. Anyway, so I'm doing the dolman sleeve jacket, and as you may have guessed, there was not enough of that fabric, but I decided to cut out the silk. This is silk, chamois, and so a satiny silk. So I cut out them first, so they're the right size. But then, yeah, there wasn't enough of this fabric, so I ended up having to use this Linton tweed because I have slightly more of this. And yeah, so I cut out all the pieces, and here they are. And I've pinned the tweed layer to the structural layer. And the next step is to, as I just said, hand stitch the two together. Because this is a pretty stable tweed, I only had to do 5 rows of hand stitching across and then 2 layers along the long sleeves. So yeah, I got out the matching threads, and here you go. I think I took footage of each one. The hand sewing does take a while, but I mean, you're going to have this jacket for the next 50 years. So in the scheme of things, I think it's worth it, but each their own, I guess. So that is 1 down, and I have 3 to go because I've got the front left, front right, back left, back right. So now I have done the 2 fronts, and now it is time to work on the 2 back ones. This structural layer, the backing fabric, is a netting, like a petticoat netting. It's really stiff, sort of plastic with holes in it. And it's what the Paris fashion houses use. Or if you want to go by the English standards, you can use horsehair canvas. So all the stitching is done. Now it is time to actually sew the pieces together. So I've got to sew the 2 back pieces together into one piece, and then you hand stitch down the seam allowance on either side of that. And then now that the back piece is one whole piece, it is time to lay the front left and front right on top. So I've got the right sides together and I'm pinning them on the inside. So just pin them all along the shoulder, like the top of the sleeve, the bottom of the sleeve that goes into the side, curves into the side. And then I just carefully machine sew those. And now it is time to do lots more hand sewing. So I have to carefully pin back the seam allowance on all these seams. And yeah, it takes a while. The underarm bit, you need to clip the curves. This underarm bit here, just pin the flat bits on the arm and the side first, then clip the curves, then pin the curve. That's the easiest way to do it. And then, yes, it took a long time to do the hand stitching, but now it's done and it's really robust. And I also did the center back seam, obviously, and it's held there really well, but you can't actually see it from the outside. Now, I pattern match beautifully across here. It's not really that difficult when you've only got 4 pieces, but I always forget how small my jackets are because I look at high fashion so much, and the models, I mean, they're only a size 10, but their shoulders make them like a size 14 or a size 16. And I forget that, yeah, when I'm looking at all those clothes, mine are actually going to be much smaller. So yeah, I'm a bit worried about that plaid print, but it should be fine once I embellish it with beads and things. Anyway, so now it is time to do the lining, the silk lining, and it's the same. I have to sew the back front 2 bits together, then sew the back to the front, and then I have to, so that's all machine sewn. Then I have to pin the silk lining to the outer jacket with the right sides together, and then I machine sewed that, and then I turned it in the correct way. I wasn't sure about these 2 together, but I quite like them now. I think they look cute. So now I also turned up the hem, but I've decided that I'm just going to get all the machine sewing done first and then do all the hand stitching at the last. So the next thing to do is the neckline. So you turn the whole jacket inside out again, pin the outer jacket neckline to the lining neckline, and then very carefully sew that. If you don't feel confident enough to do the neckline on your machine, because it is very tricky, you just baste it or hand sew it first, then machine sew it. And so I machine sewed it, and then I clipped down the seam allowance and clipped the curves so that it will sit nicely when I turned it out. Then I turned it out, and now I have the cuffs, the hem, and I have to do the top stitching along the front, around the neckline and down the front again. When you do top stitching on cotton or any dressmaking fabric, your stitches are usually visible, whereas when you're working with tweed, because of the nature of it, it's got a very loose weave, you can't actually see the top stitching, but you can tell just by looking at this jacket that everything is sitting correctly, and that is because it's all hand stitched in place. So now I'm just comparing the two. The one on the left is the size 8. That's a little large and baggy for me. I mean, it's fine if it's just one, but I'm not going to make 10 jackets that are that baggy. So this one is a much better fit. It's it's just less baggy really, and it sits on the sort of at the waist. It's a nice cropped length for me. But so I don't really like the way the plaid sort of meets at the sleeves, but there's nothing really that you can do about that. That's just the way it is. I do love this lining. It's really growing on me. It looks like an old book. It reminds me of an old book. You know how old books with like a leather cover, and then on the inside it's got that beautiful scarlet or printed bit on the holding that book proper to the cover. Anyway, I just think it's lovely. It's going to look even better when it's got some embellishment though. This is some old footage I took of, I don't know why I'm moving the camera around so much, but the sequins are on the left, and then there's the seed beads they're sort of an antique gold, but there's also some brown ones in there as well. I just think they're going to look absolutely gorgeous on this tweed. I've also got some slightly bigger brown glass beads, and I think the mix is going to be beautiful. So I'm kind of tempted now that I've seen the finished jacket to bead the whole 2 panels, those bits without the special yarns, those sort of blank bits. I don't know, I usually have to leave my jackets for a bit and just sort of walk past them every now and again, sort of hang them in the kitchen or something so that I can just stare at them while I'm waiting for the coffee or something, just so I can, usually when I see a tweed, I know exactly what I want the end jacket to look like. And I did with this one, but the sizing is so off. The plaid is so much bigger than I thought it would be. I have enough fabric for another 1 or 2 jackets. So I think on the next ones, instead of doing these stripes horizontal, I'll make them vertical. And I just think it'll be better. I mean, I'm going to fill it in with embellishment with sequin and beads, so it's not going to look as harsh. But I think that's what I'll do with them. Or maybe I'll play around and do a Vivienne Westwood, pattern, mixing with the angles. I don't know. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I am so glad I finally got one of my khaki and olive tweeds made up. And, well, it's September already, but, it's kind of an August make. Anyway, the next episode will be my sewing plans for September, and I've got autumn tones as my theme for this month. Jeepers, this year is flying by. Anyway, thank you again for watching, and happy sewing.